You're listening to Startup Recruitment Failures. Behind every successful founder lies a tale of recruitment ups and downs. Join me on this thrilling journey and learn firsthand from top leaders on how to navigate through challenges and stay ahead of the game. We all make mistakes, but the real growth happens when we learn from them early on. Hello, everyone, and hello, Anna. Anna, thank you for being here with us today and sharing your story. For those who don't know Anna, so she has 15 years in media, and she also has a PhD in AI, and her story is super interesting. She started at Culture Trip as a content person and then became a CEO. And after that, she bought the company and recently exited. So, Anna, maybe you could tell us more about your story and why this happened.
Hi, Andre. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be part of a podcast, and especially female produced podcasts. There's so many interesting stories that people have to tell, and it's always nice to have a kind of a good forum to tell these stories. Um, I guess just it probably the motivation for what I've done probably needs to go kind of back to what inspires me professionally. And I've, like you said, I've spent most of my career in media, working what I believe a very important domain in societies where media and especially news can contribute to better informed societies and better democracies. And I've always been attracted to brands that are a force for good in one sense or another. And actually, via my journey working for The Guardian, for Channel 4, for BBC, for ITV, I got to learn and appreciate what the power of a good brand and a power of a brand that actually does uh, good in the world. And whilst the previous companies were well established, I mean, The Guardian's been around for 200 years, BBC for 100 years, they're companies that probably needed to evolve and transform and constantly innovate. Culture Chip is my first startup, and it was quite an interesting experience to move from essentially established company into
Why
a.
did you make this move?
But say it again, sorry.
How did you make this move? It looks like very big step basically to
Yes, I think
go
I think
out of the comfort zone and such a stability.
absolutely. I think I've thought about it a lot, and it was mostly down to curiosity and wanting to experience what a startup life looks like and what being in hypergrowth mean.
Mm,
Because when I joined Culture Trip, it was sort of doing very well in terms of the number of people that or users that would come and enjoy the guides that they were providing. So it was curiosity paired with the fear of kind of the risk that startups bring. I believe that in any career, risk is integral part, and I probably can attribute my risk taking to sort of growth in my career when those risks have paid off. Some risks haven't. But
mhm,
on a whole, I think calculated risks are really good if done in the right way. So I joined Culture Trip for a couple of reasons. Say it was a brand that was loved then. It's very well loved now. It was pretty much in line with what I believe professionally
mhm,
excites me. And it was also a brand that was not afraid to experiment. And startups tend to do that. I think startups, by definition, have a little bit more freedom to explore um, and to push the boundaries. So I joined it for those reasons. I joined again my risk sort of. Managing nature, I joined on a contracts basis to see whether I would be kind of thriving in that environment, but B, whether, somebody with my professional experience would be necessary and whether, my skill
mhm.
set would contribute to culture trip. So it was a very calculated risk in that I joined for 6 months contract to explore using my background, which was kind of artificial intelligence and my knowledge of content and brands into sort of expanding the uh, uh, the distribution of the content of the guys that Culture Trip had, and doing it at a cost that is lower than what the industry had,
Mhm.
and at the quality of the highest brand. So it was when I joined, my brief was cover the world in travel guides at the quality of the New York Times, at the cost of user generated content, and at the distribution of TripAdvisor. And for somebody who loves problem solving within content and kind of well loved brands, that was just music to my ears. It was going to be
Mhm.
very difficult, as most kind of worthy causes tend to be, but I thought they were going to be very rewarding. So that's why I've jumped. I think the problem was meaty enough. The people that I kind of met and worked with were extremely bright, fantastic, very collaborative, and really good at what they do. What they do. So I brought tons of experience, but also I've learned a lot. So during those 6 months, I kind of enjoyed
Mhm.
that sort of research and development role a lot. The
And how from
business,
content manager's position you moved to CEO's role?
yeah. So I think that's the kind of beauty and
Mhm.
difficult part about startups. They move and they change so much.
Mhm.
And so I was at Culture Chip, just finished now for about sort of almost 5 years, 4.5 years. And it felt like working for 7 different companies rather than one.
Mhm.
So as the companies kind of evolve and move, I think the people that need to contribute to whatever the vision and the strategy is will need to evolve as well. So when I joined, after my kind of R&D role, the conversation sort of led into a bigger, more operational role because the company needed that at that time. So I've moved into a chief product officer role. And then lots of things have happened. I mean, COVID was there. There was a change in kind of leadership in the company. Lots of departures as well,
Mhm.
and so that sort of got me even bigger remit into chief product and technology role until a point where probably 3 years into my time there, post COVID, there was a need for evolution of the business model and what the company was doing. At that time, the founder has kind of left the company. We had a new CEO. That was just an absolutely fantastic, experienced CEO, but he was kind of busy managing other companies as well.
Mm.
And at that time, given that I've known a lot about the company, I've done various different roles. It was organic move where I moved into a deputy CEO role
Mhm.
just because of the constrained capacity of my boss at the time. Um, and I guess to them, it was a safe pair of hands, somebody who has tons of operational experience, somebody who knows the company and various aspects of the company. So it was probably the least risky thing for them to kind of
Yeah.
almost do. So it wasn't planned as such. I mean, I didn't join Culture Trip thinking, oh, I want to be CEO one
One
day.
day I will be a
Yeah,
CEO,
that was
right?
not. That was. I didn't put it on a post-it somewhere. Going, this is it. This is what I'll need to go for. It was more just being adaptable enough
Mm.
to take the role that the company needs at the time. And if it is the role that I believe I could contribute and I can do sort of reasonably well, then yes. So there's also sort of this notion of, if the opportunity is there, would it make me happy doing that job, and actually am I qualified for that job? And in Culture I had about sort of, well, four roles: VP of content, then chief product manager, chief product technology officer, deputy CEO, and a CEO. And
Mhm.
so within startups, there's a huge movement within, you know, within the business model and the strategy, and that then sort of impacts the type of people and the skill set that's needed. So
Mhm.
one of the things that I was pretty shocked by is kind of the pace at which these changes happen in the movements, and the pace of adaptation that was needed.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
some people, I guess, I've seen fantastic people, absolutely brilliant people who would just great at their job, but they were struggling with the pace of adaptation just because,
Mhm.
you know, it's not within their nature. They were really kind of used to having stability and then doing brilliant performance on the back of that. And then there's other people who are born for it, and you know, it's a second nature to them. And it was quite interesting to have observed because at some points, especially startups during COVID, travel startups during COVID, um, the unprecedented kind of change um, necessitated fast adaptation. I think companies on a whole did that, but I think within kind of startups that was even more prominent.
Jobrely now offers full cycle recruitment services, from creating a job ad to presenting shortlisted candidates after initial interviews. Fill out the project brief, and candidate profiles will be sourced for you. Connect your LinkedIn account, and a personalized messaging sequence will be sent from your LinkedIn account to all of the potential candidates. And after initial interviews, a comprehensive scorecard of shortlisted candidates will be presented. Visit jobrely.com and start a free trial.
Um,
Could you briefly mention to the listeners what is Culture Trip?
what is Culture Trip? Yes, of course. So Culture Trip is a destination, an online destination. It's a website. It's got an app
Mhm.
where millions of users come to get their travel guides, and they're coming to basically plan their trips. So, Culture Trips content is written by local insiders,
Mm.
and they're detailing or recommending places that are off the beaten track, that are authentic to the destination,
Mm.
and they're written by people who live there or who know the place very well. So it really resonates with travelers who want to expand their horizons, and who want to connect with the local culture and the local people. And the
Okay.
content is very well loved. That is one part of what the offering is. So you can find, I mean, a user can find guides for the history of a place, things to do, places to stay, art and culture, pretty much anything that is worthy of a specific
Mhm.
destination.
Nice.
And then the second part currently is the mission and the vision. When I took over, was sort of helping with societal problems such as loneliness, and the climate crisis. So it was creating these trips that are local insider led. They're small group trips where people can connect with each other and create new friendships, and also they can connect with a destination
Mhm.
or a place in a way that is off the beaten track, and it shows the authenticity of the place. So very much, it's a destination where you can have it all, where you can find the guides, and then actually can book a
Mhm.
fully defined trip with an itinerary for some of the places that we recommend. So that's kind of
Amazing.
the
I
culture
really
trip.
like it.
And the trips are, we I mean, now it's the capable team that has taken over Culture Trip. um, the the trips that are being run are with a view to become positive, net zero neutral, within as soon as possible. And there's a big accent on traveling in a way that is kinder to the planet, more sustainable to the planet. So there's
Mhm.
no internal flights, and obviously all the partners that were being kind of that we were working with when we were defining the trips,
Mhm.
had to kind of prove their sort of sustainability or their sort of climate
Okay.
friendly credentials.
Okay. So also a lot of social responsibility and
Absolutely, yes.
sustainability. And so how did this happen that you bought the company?
So I think it was, again, there was not a post-it there. I think it was, there was lots of changes happened, not within the just within the company, but also within the investor.
Mhm.
They wanted a kind of bigger projects that fit more within a slightly different portfolio to where Culture Trip was. So as part of the conversations, they were looking for a new home for Culture Trip, and there were multiple sources that were consulted, and the viable option at the time, or the only viable option at the time, was something called management buyout,
Mhm.
where essentially the management is taking over the running of the company. There were, obviously lots of conversations and with third parties happening as well, but it was quite a weird time. It was post COVID. It was really sort of a time, probably the worst time to fundraise. The appetite for anything that wasn't AI was
Especially for
spooky. So
traveling business when no one
yeah,
can
yeah.
travel, right?
So I must say the investors were and still are incredibly supportive. They care about the brand a lot, and they believed that sort of handing it over to management who knew the business, and they knew us all very well, and care about the business would give the business the best chance to succeed.
Mhm.
And they've been incredibly supportive throughout the whole journey. I think big factor as to why Culture Trip is continuing on and evolving, and kind of I believe will move into becoming even kind of more loved and bigger brand, is on the back of the support from the investors at the time. They've showed incredible sort of forward looking mentality in a way that I haven't seen anywhere else. So always grateful for the support.
Mhm.
So it was more. I mean, there was a point where I was sort of a CEO, but at the time, or deputy CEO. I'm so sorry, something fell. Oh, sorry, just lots of things on my desk. Apologies.
No
We
worries.
might need to cut it off, but so sorry. Going back, at the time I was deputy CEO, but I had a kind of support of lots of incredibly experienced sort of colleagues within the investor, and it didn't feel it felt like if something was going wrong, or I needed advice, there was a place to go to.
Mm.
And to be fair, they were always there. They remained there, but in a less formal kind of capacity. Um, and when the possibility for management buyout came out, I was very green behind the ears. I was very sort of unexperienced and kind of driven by the love for the brand, and the care for all the employees, and sort of wanting to continue to work with them in achieving brilliant things. That there was probably a slight naivety around
Mhm.
what the management buyout means, and what I was taking on from a corporate responsibility, and all the sort of finances that needed sorting out, and lots of debt, and things around the investment that I wasn't particularly aware of,
Mhm.
down to being sort of the only person responsible for the company from a liability point of view, which
Mhm.
meant if something bad happens on the trip, I am,
Mm.
the ultimate responsible person. And in certain countries, that would probably mean a not probably that would mean a criminal prosecution as well.
Oh,
So
wow.
there was a point. I mean, it was a huge responsibility anyway, but that was sort of even more so, um, uh, kind of supported. Well, not supported, but exacerbated by the roles as a director of the company with legal responsibilities. So there was a point where, again, when I talk about risk, there's a risk of taking a contract job in a startup, and then there's a risk of taking sort of responsibilities for unforeseen circumstances. As we know, in the time that I was running the company, I was the sole director of the company. Um, there were earthquakes, two wars happened, so it was just managing, working with the team and managing those sort of things were, scary enough. ensuring
Mm.
that you do need
How
to
did
hire.
you deal with the stress?
At the beginning I didn't. I had high blood
Mhm.
pressure. um, I had high blood pressure and trouble sleeping, because it was constantly sort of in my mind. Um,
Mhm.
I guess it's trying to sort of satisfy in your mind the fact that you've taken on some risks, but things are going to be okay, and then you go through all these scenarios of what if there's an earthquake, what if people who are on a trip now we can't get out, what if somebody's under rubble, all these sort of scenarios which are real life scenarios would have gone through my mind. So frankly, I at the beginning I wasn't particularly sort of managing it very well. I had at times high blood pressure. And then there's a point of, I guess, not then, it was always there, but there's a point of sort of realizing why have I done it in the first place? Because I did have this conversation with myself at some point, going, can you do this? Are you up for this?
Mhm.
Essentially, because ultimately it would be me that's responsible for everything. And there's a few things where I sort of the answer was yes, because of a few things. I had a very um, deep belief that I've got the best team in the world to do it, and that if we can't do it, then nobody else can do it. And it's
Okay.
sort of there's a point where you relinquish control, and you go, I'm just gonna, not but I've always done that, but within the context of being a
Mhm.
director, this newfound situation. I've always trusted my team. I've always, but this was slightly different. This was kind of,
Mhm.
personal, if you like. And then you think about it, and I kind of thought, well, what are the principles that have always proven to work for me? And that sort of trust
Mhm.
in the team was number one. And I felt, that's how I kind of the stress started to be manageable, where
Mhm.
there was a realization that nothing's different,
Mhm. And
that.
you mentioned that you were a little bit naive, right? So you became a owner of the company. What started happening? What challenges did you start facing, and what were the next step for you to move forward and finally exit the company?
Yeah, so I think there's the challenge when you have a kind of a startup is always fundraising. If the
Mhm.
startup needs more funds, an infusion of funds. So fundraising was one thing, ensuring that, and that was probably fundraising in the worst possible year to fundraise was sort of quite a baptism of fire for me, in terms of never done it before. I think there's the second part was scaling down the business to be the most cost efficient that it can be, so it's attractive to investors. So uh, as a kind of new CEO, just prior to kind of being appointed as a CEO, we had to scale down the company by 90%. That was,
90%.
yes, that was
Wow. So from how many people to how many?
so from about 200 and sort of 50 with freelancers to 25. So
Okay. That's a
it was
lot.
it was yeah, it was really horrible. I mean, I never want to do that again, and it really affected my health, and I really sort of struggled during that time, because it wasn't we weren't sort of the reason was not that those people were not great. It was absolutely a dream workforce, and they were absolutely brilliant. It was tough. It was post COVID. There were existential threats to a lot of brands. The um, the cost needed to be low to be attractive to the investors, and the business model, the new business model with the trips was not requiring such a huge and very, in some at
Mhm.
some sort of departments, quite a senior workforce. So it was all out of necessity, and it was very painful, because those were my colleagues who I really enjoyed working with, and we tried to and did it in the most humane way possible, which was, I think, something not to be proud of, but to just well, maybe a little pride, in terms of there's different ways in which you can scale down
Mm-hmm.
organizations. We try to do it in the most human, people first sort of way,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a huge thank you to the executive team, especially the head of people,
Mm-hmm.
that did we did all of that with bundles of empathy and support, financial support where it was necessary. So that's hard. There's no way. I mean, there's no way to kind of put it any other way. And if it doesn't affect you, you should not be in leadership. Like, of course, we all have to do really difficult things, but I particularly didn't enjoy that bit at all.
Oh,
And it
that.
it did affect my health, and I did have higher blood pressure, and it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. But on the other hand, I think extreme transparent communication really helps, and treating sort of people without holding information that would help them understand the context, that
Mm-hmm.
helped a lot. So when we would look at the finances and where we were as a company during COVID and beyond, it was very clear that something significant needs to change for the
Mm-hmm.
brand to a to survive, and b to actually create and continue to create this growth strategy. So
Mm-hmm.
that was really hard. The part that was sort of easier is those 25 people that were left were sort of absolutely amazing, the best people a person can ask for to work alongside. And there's something around tight knit teams who are willing to do everything to fight against sort of all odds to grow and succeed, and that mentality was there. And I've
How
never
did
enjoyed.
how did you make the decision to select these 25 people out of 250?
So I think there was there was a obviously a process for people who are interested to apply for the roles that are available.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that happened, and some people obviously that quite a few of the people decided to look for another opportunity because they believe they've given to the brand as much as possible, and they needed a little bit of rest. When you've been in a company for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
probably a reset is needed. And
Mm-hmm.
then the folks who remained were uh, entrepreneurial to start with,
Mm-hmm.
very high tolerance for risk and uncertainty, because when we did the kind of the strategy, I've shared the strategy. This is where we're going. We're going to continue to kind of make trips to be our focus. We're going to have a single focus. We're going to be smaller team. And it was very sort of also transparent. We need to fundraise, um, and we need to deliver at a pace we've never done before to create growth, so that we're interesting to investors. And it was transparent to them as well. I've kind of told everybody I've never done fundraising, never been a CEO. I've had travel experience only at culture trips. So if anybody's worried about these things, I totally understand if you want to move on. But if anybody's kind of up for
Mm-hmm.
trying to see what we can do together, then the promise was that always be transparent. I'll look after them. We'll look after each other, and we're just going to try and sort of break through.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the selection was mostly people who understood the situation and still found the challenge. People who understood the brand and loved it,
Mm-hmm.
but most importantly, people who wanted to make a difference, and were willing to be ultra flexible. I mean, going from 250 to 25 is quite a change for an organization. It's
It
sort of
is
you come in
indeed.
and
Yeah.
you turn around and you go, "Where is everybody?" So
Were there any other things you need to change when you bought the company?
I mean, lots of things. It was almost like a new way of working,
Mm-hmm.
kind of singular focus on trips, but we've kept advertising parts of the advertising. Well, we've kept the advertising bit, but the hotels and the experience part where we're not there. Lots of things. I mean, you go from kind of being a sort of mid-sized company to actually being a post seed level startup. So
Mhm.
the mentality needed to change, the processes needed to change. I mean, we've spent probably a year, well,
Mhm.
huge engineering teams, a huge platform. So we've spent a year just shutting things kind of down that would just break the site, and there's no team there that works and knows what to do. So the whole scale down is not, I mean, the human element is the most painful one, but the amount of kind of um, the amount of infrastructure work that was needed was
Mhm.
quite sort of was quite tough. So the teams would had to almost like you've kind of you've demolished part of the house. The rubble needs to be taken away, whilst at the same time you're building a new extension of the house. It's a terrible analogy. I'm really sorry, but I can't think of anything else. But you know what I mean. So it's
Yeah.
sort of clearing up of the old, so it doesn't sort of the website would break regularly, and there was nobody there. We went from the engineering team of about 60 people to 7, and those poor 7 people had to kind of ingest the work of quite a few
Mm.
of their colleagues. Great work, but again, capacity does mean
Yeah,
that
definitely.
you cannot sort of expect 7 people to understand everything very quickly. So there was a year where we were just kind of trying to explore how to reset, sort of on the infrastructure level, on the technical level, on the processes and how the company would work, on the corporate governance level, whilst trying to grow the business to sort of make sure that we use the limited time that we had for fundraising to find
Mhm.
a partner that would believe in the company and would allow it to continue.
I see. And so a year passed for you to reshape everything. And then how did you find the buyer?
So there's a fundraising raising process
Hmm.
that we went through. We just because we were such a small company, and we had to the point of we had to reshape, we had to grow
Hmm.
and fundraise. There was not enough capacity, so we've partnered with a boutique company, with kind of a fundraising individual that essentially helped us with the process, because otherwise there was not going to be sort of enough
Hmm.
capacity, and it was absolutely unfair to ask the amazing execs, the really capable execs in the company, to do about 5 jobs. They were doing already 3 jobs, So we found this fantastic partner within the fundraising space, and he's very selective who he works with. So because it was such a challenged time for a lot of companies, it was kind of, again, I keep saying it was the worst time to fundraise at the time, with cost of living and wars, and the sort of investors were rightly so cautious about things. And so he ran a process. He's done that before. He decided, when we had a conversation, he decided we are a good company
Hmm.
to help us with the fundraising. So him and I worked together alongside pretty much all the company. People would come in when they needed to sort of talk to investors and corporates. And at this point, we were open to multiple sort of aspects. It could have been sort of investment, it could have been acquisition,
Hmm.
um, it could have been some merger. And uh, the process is basically, that these fundraising kind of specialists have huge amount of contacts, have huge amount of experience, and you go through their list. Once they understand what your kind of needs are and where the industry is, and they kind of come back and say, look, we've whittled it down to maybe these 30 contacts
Hmm.
that we should tap into. And then, or 30 or 60 or whatever the number was, we've spoken to quite a few people, and then the contact is being made. Obviously there has to be a really good presentation, or some level of some communication document that is being shared, where um, the main selling points of the company are there, with some of the results and some of the sort of obviously the assets that the business has. So that was being sent out, and then we got people being interested, or people saying this is great, it's just not in line with our portfolio. And part of the fundraising process is that there's lots of no's. And I
Yeah,
think
that's inevitable.
it is inevitable. And I mean, in general, being a CEO, my view, and being a CEO of a startup and doing fundraising, there's no space for ego at all. And your ego needs to go on holiday, very long holiday somewhere in another country, basically.
Mhm.
Um, so there were lots of kind of no's. This is great. It's just not in line with what we want, or it's not at the scale that we want. Different sort of investors or corporates have different views, and then normally it comes down to three or four sort of real prospects where the conversations are getting much deeper. And I think the conversation is both ways, in terms of what the potential kind of investor is looking for, and also what the company is looking for in a potential investor. And the way we would do it is that the entire team, we would have weekly all hands, and the entire team would know who we spoke to. We'll probably not, if it's non-disclosure, we would just say we've spoken to investor within this section or this area, we're talking to them, so obviously not sharing details where it's inappropriate. And also, I was very transparent to say we've got 5 no's today, this week, or 3 no's this week. But these are the sort
For
of
everyone to
contingent.
feel the pulse, right?
Yes, and I think there was a point where the fundraising is really tough, and it takes it out of you, because um, you do have to maintain very high energy and kind of repeat almost sort of the pitch a lot. And you can get very deep, and then at some point with somebody, and at some point they'll say, well, we've done our due diligence, actually it's not for us. So it's very sort of volatile process with lots of ups and downs. And the worry that I had with the team is that it was fine for me to take the burden should they as well. And I've asked them openly to say, I go through these daily, it's a no and it's a yes, and it's kind of we should continue. Do you want to know or not? Because I can just share the highlights. And all of them said fine, yes, they do want to know, and that that would not impact their enthusiasm for the job, which it hasn't. Because I think
Mhm.
once you've spoken to somebody for 3-4 months and then it's a no, it is a bit disappointing, and you do need to kind of spend, I don't know, half a day being depressed or whatever, and then kind of pick yourself up the next day and find that sort of energy and go, we'll keep going, and it's going to be great because I know we're amazing in what we are doing, and the brand. So communication helped. I don't it again whether in every situation that sort of that transparency is useful. I would probably say no, because it can affect people's morale and kind of dedication. So it has to be sort of the right level of communication for how receptive the audience is. But we were so close and so determined to make this make this work, that it felt right for what we were doing. And then I think ultimately we found a partner that we believe was the right partner for Culture Trip. And obviously, the company also believed it's sort of it is the right partner for Culture Trip, is the right partner for them. And yeah, it was they came to London, they met us, they met the team. We spent an awful lot of time talking, and um, the more conversation happened, the more we realized that this is a good fit. And yes, I mean, there's a point where you sign something called term sheet, where essentially you go deeper into due diligence, and it's sort of almost pre-deal sort of
Mhm.
investigation that needs to happen to make sure that the investors want to make sure that there's no areas for concern, and the business, from a legal point of view and from compliance point of view, has done everything in the right way, and so on. And that those due diligence are really quite intense. So I have to kind of again hand it to the team. The company grew. I mean, with the new business model, the growth was about 70 to 80% year on year on revenue.
Mhm.
It was kind of incredible in a very difficult sort of external circumstance. So
Mhm.
not only they were pushing for that, but then they would have to kind of respond to so many due diligence kind of questions from normally a law firm is appointed to do the due diligence on a behalf of the investor. So everyone sort of felt like they had two or three jobs, so different sort of jobs, and they did it so admirably and beautifully. And then there's a
That's the
painful,
trickiest part, right? So when
yeah,
selling the company, you still need to keep the growth. Otherwise, if you lose that potential lead, you will have to go look for after another one, right? So, and it's always
absolutely.
like two path on at the same time.
No, absolutely, and that was really tricky. I'm kind of, from my experience, that part was really tricky because you go through. I mean, these conversations last for months,
Yeah.
so for 6 months, and in those 6 months, your kind of assumption is, or the conversation is, we'll need to continue what we're doing because we assume there's not going to be a huge change in the strategy. So full throttle, in terms of the growth of what we're experiencing, whilst there's a whole layer of negotiating, kind of, okay, what do you want to get out of this acquisition? What do you want to, what how this brand will support your business? Is there anything that we're not doing that you want us to do?
Mm,
And so it's sort of, there's a little bit of kind of this level of this period of uncertainty where you continue to do what you've been doing, but equally that things inevitably will change because they always change.
yeah.
And at the same time you're doing sort of the due diligence, so it was tough. And I mean, the kind of the legal side of kind of contracts, that I've never sort of realized how much time that takes. I
Yeah.
was sort of shocked. And towards the end, my job was pretty much spending 80% of my time with lawyers and 20% with the business. And it was just, I mean, I love lawyers. They're brilliant at what they do. It was just not whatever I wanted to be. I wanted to be with my team and build a
I know for
business.
us
And
entrepreneurs, it's like it's not what we're supposed to do, right? But in the end,
there's a point of
still,
that, absolutely, when you
yeah,
kind of go, well, I enjoyed building this with the team, and then sort of,
yeah,
I would disappear for days on end, and the team's like, well, where are you? I'm like, with the lawyers, in a meeting after meeting,
yeah,
or
yeah,
reading documents. It's inevitable part, and I think it, for the business, the type of culture was about 2-3 months, but I can imagine with bigger businesses that it can kind of take huge amount of time.
yeah, yeah.
And
It
so,
used.
yes, I think then things have kind of closed, and there's a point of being elated and really happy that the brand that everybody worked so hard to bring to a level of stability and uh, further growth and investment, you've done that
Mhm,
against all odds in a very difficult year. And then there's a point of mixture of sort of sadness and excitement,
mhm,
sadness for sort of losing that very limited period of time where everybody's kind of deep into, we want to make this happen and we'll do whatever we can, that sort of, we're on a mission, but also excitement about what the future can bring in terms of this sort of the new partnership that was completed. And I think everybody
yeah,
felt the same. And the bit that I didn't realize is, I kind of think I'm very tough, which is, well, I am tough, but sort of equally, I
mhm.
just didn't realize all the emotions that I was going to feel throughout the process. And they're so mixed. And it was just so, from one day, this is amazing, to the next day, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this type of thing. So I guess well, I don't know whether it's a normal process. I haven't done this before. But yes, I think it is quite intense,
Yeah, and
intense
it's
period.
also this adrenaline rush, right? When you have this challenge and you work as a team, and it's like, you're fighting and you're like reaching for almost and like really high targets, and then it's done, right? So
It's
it's
that,
like,
yeah, and then you kind of,
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah, that's exactly it. And then it's that, and then you just go, oh, so what's
What
next?
do I do
Okay,
next?
yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think I mean, and we did talk about this, that you do get sort of addicted to drama a bit. There's a lot of drama throughout that
Especially after
process.
such a long time, right? If it's only
Yeah.
1 week, then it's just a period of time. It's a moment, right? But if
Yes.
it's like a year or longer, then it's like a new norm where you get used to.
Absolutely, and this is the kind of the oddest thing. So in that year, there was an earthquake in Morocco. There was bed bugs. There was the
Mm.
war in Ukraine. It
Yeah, I
affected lots
remember
of
that.
travelers. There was kind of the conflict in Israel, and so it was already pretty tough for travel and for our kind of customers who were affected by these events. I mean, everybody is affected, but those that were on the ground directly. I mean, I don't think anybody can say that the horrors of last year do not affect all of us, or we don't bear responsibility to try and
Mhm.
sort of just give our voice towards kind of making the world a better place, because it's not great at the moment.
Mhm.
But to your point, there's a moment where high intensity sort of way of operating becomes the norm, and I was very mindful of my team, um, and just kind of saying you've got to take some time off if you feel like you need
Mm.
it. And we were fairly good at sort of looking after ourselves. I don't think there was, because that was my mantra. um, Nothing is more important than your own health and your own happiness, because if you're happy
Mhm.
and rested, you will be much better at work than if you're not. But I mean, there was a point where I worked on Christmas Day, on Boxing Day, pretty much every weekend, like every
Mm.
weekend during that period, and it became very unhealthy on one hand. On the other hand, I kind of that's extreme focus was sort of quite refreshing, where you've got one job, you've got one goal, and that's what you're focusing on, and that's what you do. So in a short period of time, probably it can work, but I just don't think it was kind of it can be
Yeah.
sustainable in a
Yeah,
longer
yeah,
period of time. And
totally
it was the
agree.
same with the team. So we were very mindful, but equally there was this level of obsessiveness that we had amongst us. So
Mhm.
my head of kind of customer operations, Katie, she we were obsessing about um, bookings. So she and I, for some reason, would sync up and wake up every night at 2 o'clock to see what the bookings are spontaneously, because most of the customers, 80% of the customers, were in the US, and that's when majority of the bookings would happen. For some reason, our body clocks would be kind of waking up, and in the morning we would text each other to say, "Oh, we've had." "Oh, this was a great night. We've had this many," or not many, and kind of why this has happened. So you do get into that sort of probably healthy for the company, but unhealthy for the individual on the long term. And we did acknowledge it. And as a CEO, I never believed that level of sort of immersion within your job is actually good.
Mm.
But we knew that we did it for a short period of time.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's always a dilemma, right? How to find the balance. But congratulations. It's a really impressive story. I can't even imagine how much of energy and sleepless night it took from you. And I'm very glad to hear that you managed to achieve what you were seeking for.
Thank you, Indra. I think it's probably a good story. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not a great story but for entrepreneurs to kind of know it
Mm.
is really tough. Um, but on the other hand, if a year and a half ago somebody asked me, "Would you do it again?" I really would, and that's not a masochistic side. There's sort of the difficulties and the challenges and the volatility are really sort of countered by the sense of purpose and empowerment and drive to with a bunch of other fabulous kind of professionals and individuals to do something in the world, and to know that you've done it, that
Yeah.
it is you, and um it goes, I mean, it's both, it's sort of a kind of quite a lovely balance in some
Mm.
shape or form.
Nice, nice. Yeah, so I usually finish the episode, each of the episode, with a key advice for the future founders. So imagine if like a person thinking of going similar path as you did, or becoming an entrepreneur, or find a company, what would be the main advice you would give to them?
Um, it's a really good note to end on. I would say, firstly, be 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 very aware of why you want to do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the moment, I'm kind of doing some pretty not particularly exciting things of sort of liquidating entities, legal entities, and so on. And it's a very long process. So be mindful why you want to do what you want to do, and how much you can dedicate to it. I think it's sort of what I'm trying to say very clumsily is, are you up for it? Is this the right thing for you at this
Mm-hmm.
point in time in your life?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if it is, if there's nothing else that excites you more than actually the journey, and not the glitz of the exits, or the, the not the glitz of the exits, or the uh, the perceived glamour of being an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
then I would say, if all of those things fit together, and there's an awareness of the amount of work and sacrifice that's needed, then I would say, by all means, do it, but do ask yourself questions before,
Mm-hmm.
and in a way, I've asked myself some questions, probably not enough for what transpired to be much more complex process to what I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
So just at a high level, just ask yourself questions. On the other hand, if you know all the risks, nobody would start anything. So
True.
I
True.
think that's the bit where, if it's the right thing for you at this time, and if you can afford it with your family set up, with your kind of where you are, with your capacity, with sort of your purpose, with your professional kind of ambition, with your
Mm-hmm.
mental health as well, because the level of resilience that some startups require, not
Mm-hmm.
all, is sort of incredible. Then absolutely do it. And I think naivety is good. Sometimes ignorance is actually an ally.
Yeah.
And don't try to have all the answers, at once, because I kind of see quite a few startups now who, want my opinion on things. And it's quite interesting, that some of them are at a level that I wouldn't think myself that, I would go and pitch with that level. I would want to know much more details. But actually, it kind of, on reflection, it is the right level where
Mm.
you do need to be naive, and you do need to be a little bit uninformed about certain aspects. But you need to, countering that, you need to have an amazing idea,
Mm.
that you truly believe in, and you've done your research. That it's not going to be three people that would buy that service, but more. That it needs to be impactful. Sorry, it's not very cohesive advice, but
Yeah, it's a very good one because like young people especially could be very easily um like confused maybe even sometime because you check the Instagram of startup founders and they're traveling. It's like beautiful places and like different countries all the time and some like nice events they're participating at. So it's always like everyone is posting only the most beautiful aspects of their life, right? But what is behind all that, it's not so glamorous after all, right? You're working 12 hours per day, you have huge amount of stress load and accountability. And in order, to be happy and appreciate the moment and to make this post, you need to really work a lot with yourself to be at this state of mind, right? So it's, yeah, I guess it's a like amazing advice to really be aware of what's waiting. But of course, to be naive. And as you said, if we know what's waiting for us, we would most probably not go for it. So sometimes it's better to be hopeful.
Absolutely, just in the right measures, I guess. And I think that when you're in an early stage startups, doing events is probably the worst thing you can do. Like having a glitzy lifestyle,
Yeah,
you need to be in the trenches, delivering, developing, building the business. Really.
yeah.
Obviously it depends on the startup, but generally
Mhm.
it's very hands on, and it's I don't like the word hustling, but there's a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
Just trying to figure out basically, would this work? No, this doesn't work. Let's kind of look at this one and what does that
Mm.
mean? And there's that sort of relentless nature where you do need to obsess, you kind of not to be deterred by failures as well. The
Yeah.
failure is just another step to get to the success. And anyway, I can talk until tomorrow, but
Great,
you get the
great.
gist.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna, for being here and sharing your story and your insights.
Thank you, Indra. I had a great time chatting, and hopefully the listeners will find some of the things we've discussed useful.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe on the media of your choice. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And if you need help with your recruitment, please visit jobrely.com.